Welcome back to the Present Fathers Podcast. Our guest in this episode is a single father of three who goes by the name of Penny2X. Penny is a passionate advocate for free speech and a dedicated single father to three. He is well known for hosting live spaces and other events on the X platform and is a leading citizen journalist, especially on the X platform. Here are some of the key takeaways you can look forward to in this episode. One, we get into the primary goals of fatherhood and Penny's advice based off his experience as a single father. Next, we get into social media and its potential to be both positive and negative, and finding ways to incentivize positivity over negativity. Next, we get into the importance of free speech and how crucial it is for freedom of thought, and essentially is the foundation for all other freedoms we enjoy. How to teach your children critical thinking, communication skills, and other essentials as they transition from childhood into adulthood. And finally, we get into some other positivity where we talk about understanding how to create win-win situations for other people. We talk about how that requires empathy, compassion, a great deal of understanding and perspective. And Penny is one of the leading people in this endeavor because he has actually started several campaigns through X to make positive outcomes for people all over the world. And it's very inspiring. And I think he's got some great ideas when it comes to how we create a better world, even if you haven't met the people yet. So please welcome Penny2X to the Present Fathers Podcast. We are thrilled to share this episode with you. Welcome back to the Present Fathers Podcast. This is a very fun episode for us because we have someone on who just recently revealed his face to the internet. And we're very excited to explore fatherhood from his perspective. Please welcome Penny to the Present Fathers Podcast. Penny, how are you, brother?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks, George. It's a great day today.
Yeah, man. Well, we are absolutely pumped to have you on and explore, fatherhood through your eyes. And I know you've got a lot of very unique perspectives to share with us. So real quick, can you go into a little bit of your background, who you are, tell us a little bit about your family, and then we'll kind of carry forward the conversation from there.
Yeah, no problem. I go by Penny. I have three daughters. My oldest is 14 and my youngest is 5. I've been a single dad for a long time now. So, that's sort of probably the perspective that I have the most information on. My background is in tech. I've been building, all variety of software, whether it's internet or embedded systems for, almost 25 years. I started young when I was still in high school. I planned to attend university, follow the normal path, but I got hired as an intern when football season ended my senior year, and I just sort of never looked back. I had great mentors, and it's led me down a path that's been great. So, yeah, now I spend nearly all of my time on X, trying to make the world a better place.
I love it, man. Yeah, I know you're definitely one of the more positive people on X. It can be a very not positive place for sure, but you definitely bring the positivity to the platform. Appreciate that. And I'd like to turn it over to Dustin to kind of carry through the initial sets of questions here and get things going.
Yeah, let's do it. Penny, good to see you. We've done lots of spaces together. This is really cool to have your face here. So I'm looking forward to doing more of these with the X spaces where we now have visual. So the whole podcast medium is kind of coming full circle. It's really interesting to see that. So when we first met, you were talking about mission. That was your big goal. You wanted to have that mission. You wanted other men and women to have a great mission to guide us. Has your mission changed? What is your mission right now today?
Well, it hasn't changed, right? At a high level. At a high level, what I'm trying to do is make the world a better place for my kids, right? Like, if my girls grow up and they end up in a world that is like really negative or for whatever other reason, not conducive to their happiness and success, that is the worst possible outcome for me. And to the extent that I can spend my time making it better for them, giving the next generation a chance to enjoy, this beautiful earth that we have been gifted, right? Then that's what I want to do. So I've spent a lot of time like in corporate America, building things for other people, and I had some success doing that. But now, what I would like to build is a future for my kids, right? So there are different ways to do that. certain points along the journey, I was more focused on just growing my reach, thinking that like when I did that, I would have the platform to accomplish good things. But I think what I'm refocusing on recently is the idea that like that's how you get the platform. That's how you make the difference. Like you have to start with the good things, right? And that's what differentiates you from, you know, the million billion other people that would love to grow on YouTube or X or wherever else.
That makes sense. So make the mission part of the growth, and then it's a virtuous circle that kind of works all together there. I like that.
That's right. So if I can create content that has a positive influence on the people that are a part of it, if it can have a positive influence on the people that are consuming it, if it teaches critical thinking in like a way that leads humanity to make better decisions in the future, then I am accomplishing my mission. So there's all sorts of ways to do that. And I feel like I'm still sort of finding my way, but it's a focus and something that I have like a really, really high level of determination to accomplish.
So from a high level, we're looking at social media. There's all this stuff in the news. As a Floridian today, a law was just passed that no one under 14 is allowed on social media. There's all this evidence that kids, I don't know if you saw that. Yeah, it's really interesting. So if a 13-year-old has a Facebook account, it's deleted. If he's a Florida citizen, they're getting rid of all of this. So it's a really interesting, kind of change and initiative. So from a high level, when you look at social media, there's a lot of positives and a lot of negatives. Do you think that the potential for social media is mostly positive and that it's going to be a force for good going forward, say in the next 10 years? Or are you worried that it will actually be a more negative force and that we have to be really careful with it?
Well, it's a super nuanced question, right? I think that the internet, if we just start with that, has been like massively good for humanity. The access to information from all around the world is like unprecedented, and you can learn more as just a general citizen on an Android phone on some coffee shop's Wi-Fi than like the king of great empires could have in the past, right? So that is like, I think, undisputably good. Now, when it comes to social media, it may be a bit different, right? I think probably what I dislike the most about social media is that it seems to amplify the worst of humanity. So when you post something that's like super controversial, something that divides rather than unites, there's a good chance that you get people on both sides to get involved with that discussion, and that just amplifies it even further. That like sort of incentive structure, I'm not a fan of. I don't think that it has to be inherent or like, I don't think that it's impossible to separate that from social media. So I think, like, to answer your question more directly, yeah, probably we should be concerned, but what we should be concerned about is how do we create incentives in the algorithms such that content that's good for humanity is what gets promoted the most, while not censoring, right? Because like, I would argue that it's probably good for a majority of those kids 14 and under to not have social media accounts. As someone who's like generally like very libertarian, I have a hard time with it being a law. So I would rather, as a parent, have the right to make a decision personally on whether my kids are on social media or not, because I just don't trust the powers that be to, I mean, like, maybe in this case, they're right? Like maybe in social media, it is the right decision, and maybe all parents should do that. But as soon as you give them the power to make those decisions for you, instead of you making the decisions for yourself, I don't know, like, I lose trust quickly. I don't have a lot of faith in our government to make the right decisions right now. There are representatives, elected representatives, that say things to me that are just outright bonkers. So yeah, that's sort of my position.
That's a really great point. There's so many laws that seemed like a good idea initially, and then we realized, wow, this wasn't a great idea, right? It seemed like a great idea. If there's a virus around, let's just lock everyone down for a few weeks. At least in medicine, I thought, okay, that makes sense. We'll stop the spread of the virus, do it for 2 weeks, no big deal. Didn't work out as well as I'd initially hoped it would. So I think you're right. There's a lot of law of unintended consequences there. You may have heard of the Cobra effect, which is kind of fun, where there were cobras all over India in the 1800s when the British government took over. And so the government said, okay, we're going to pay people to kill cobras, and if you bring one in, we'll give you money for it. Right? Seems like a good idea. Fewer cobras. Didn't work that way. People started breeding cobras right, to kill them, to bring them into the government. And then the Cobra problem was even worse than it was initially. So that Cobra effect happens all the time, where the government tries to fix a problem and it actually makes it worse.
And for all we know, it was like a Cobra breeder that came up with the idea for the law in the first place, or lobbied for it, right? Like you have to be careful about the incentives and follow the money. I feel like that's like the reoccurring theme
Is that
in
an allusion
humanity.
to the defense industry?
Could be.
I couldn't help myself on that one.
Yeah. So to follow
Take
up
us
on
off
that,
there, but
no, you're fine. Yeah. So
yeah,
Penny,
you had also alluded to free speech, Penny. So obviously, I've sworn an oath to defend such things personally, but also, I think we've seen it. It's funny, all the backlash about it, right? Elon's takeover of X, and the fact that many accounts that were, in my opinion, very unjustly banned, have a platform again. So what's your perspective on not just X specifically, but in general, this digital age, the digital town square, right? How important is free speech and being able to hear any and everyone? Where do we draw the line? I know that this is something near and dear to your heart, so I'd love to get your perspective on it. And then maybe final little thing to add in is, as parents, how do we teach our kids that healthy balance, moving through life?
Free speech to me is like the most important issue. Like freedom to me is the most important issue. And freedom of speech is like equates to freedom of thought and like the foundation for all other freedoms from my point of view. Right. And I'm also a defender of the Second Amendment because I think that it defends the First Amendment. It's like, it's all about freedom to me. So with that, though, like there's a lot of complexity that comes with that point of view. And to say that I'm a free speech absolutist, like I can't say that I'm a free speech absolutist. Absolutist is like a really, really powerful word, right? So even though it's my most important issue, I still struggle with it sometimes. One reasonable example from today is like there was an article. It was a front page magazine article or cover story rather about Andrew Huberman and like some of his private life. And while certainly I think that there should be the freedom to write that article, I really struggle with the fact that I don't think anyone benefits from it being written, except for the publication that's going to get tons of ad impressions, tons of sold magazines or whatever. But it doesn't benefit anyone. It doesn't benefit the women involved. It doesn't benefit Andrew. It doesn't benefit any of his viewers. It doesn't have any effect on his work. Right? Like the things that he presents in the public world are very much different from that. So like, how do you disincentivize the fact that everyone was talking about that today? Like, how do you keep that to be less of front of mind would be something that I would like to engineer a solution for without adding censorship. I don't know what that looks like exactly. I do have some ideas. Actually, Dustin and I had talked on a sidebar about ideas that we have for the algorithm and like what we could do to promote free speech, but also like good speech having some sort of advantage, right? Like, I don't think that it's right to tell anyone really that they can't say anything. But another example is there's a lot of tension, racial and geopolitical tension right now because of wars, right? And when I join a space speaking about either of those conflicts, it doesn't take long usually for me to like shut down mentally because there's just so much rhetoric about this group or that group. And I don't even have to mention any groups because I don't care which group it is, right? Like they're coming down on groups really heavily right now. And I can't say that I want them or that I wish that it would be against the law. Like it shouldn't be against the law. You should be able to say whatever you want, but it overwhelms the conversation. There's a lot of it happening and it brings a lot of eyeballs and a lot of attention. I would love to do something about that is like the nuance that I would add. As it relates to my kids, the best advice that I could give any parent, just like if I had an elevator pitch, right, is I talk to my kids like they're about 5-10 years older than they actually are all the time, right? Like from the minute they're born, I'm talking to them like they're 5-year-olds. When they're 5 years old, I'm talking to them like they're 10, 12-year-olds, right? And in that way, they are creating like a mental model for the world that is ahead of their time. And I think that like just teaching them to think critically and to not accept that just because your teacher says something that is true, that's not to say that you should ignore everything that they say, but it is to say that you understand that they have an agenda, right? And sometimes their agenda aligns very perfectly with yours. Like they want to teach you math and that's their agenda. Great. But sometimes they want to teach you about something from their personal life, and your own personal moral framework may or may not align with theirs, and that's okay. Right. But I think there's a tendency with kids to just sort of trust authority, and not that I want my kids to be paranoid or like go around thinking that everyone is lying to them all the time, but just like think about what people tell you and don't accept it for what it is, and don't assume that your kids can't understand something, right? Because often they're definitely able to. It's just they need the context. They need you to break it down for them into the different pieces that play into whatever situation you're talking about. And I think if you treat them with that respect, then they'll give your voice the respect that it deserves, right? I think it's a two-way street in that regard.
Yeah. That's some really good points. You had listed some, or you had mentioned some ideas that you and Dustin have shared about maybe how to incentivize constructive free speech as opposed to just all of it. So what are some of those ideas? Because I think you're talking probably about X, right? But you could probably adapt those to be a little bit more universal. And then we could think about that as dads and like, how do we train our kids to maybe think about those things critically moving forward, and because who knows what's going to come around the corner, right? 10 years from now, it may be some new thing, right? AI driven, who knows? But
one of the biggest problems with freedom of speech is, or like problem isn't the right word, but like challenges, right? Is that there's the pursuit of truth. Like, how do you figure out what it is that's true versus what it is that isn't true? And community notes was a feature that X created. I think it was called something else before. Doesn't matter. The point is Birdwatch, right? Mm-hmm. So it was designed to help in the pursuit of truth, and the technique that they used, Dustin pointed out in a post of his, might be applied to things like the algorithm, right? So they use what do you call it, Dustin? Is it unusual consensus, unlikely consensus?
Unlikely consensus model. Yeah.
Unlikely consensus. And what that means is if two people are generally on the opposite side of arguments, and this is like pretty easy to run a statistical analysis on if you have a bunch of data points on people, right? If I'm like always following the line of the left and this other person is always following the line of the right, and we agree finally on something, then there's a good chance in this unlikely consensus that is truth, right? There's a higher chance that it's truth than if only one of us did, or if a bunch of people on the left or a bunch of people on the right all agreed, right? And left and right are just examples. It could be opposite sides of any spectrum, right? So imagine if we applied something like that to the like button, for example, and it could be on YouTube or X or any other social media, where if people like it, and it's an unlikely consensus, then probably it's something that's just generally positive, right? And I think that could be an approach that could make a difference. I am sure that as humans that can engineer things like airplanes and rocket ships, that we can figure out a way to create an algorithm that incentivizes good behavior. And that might be one piece of it.
So to incentivize good behavior, like this video right now, everyone listening, and subscribe, create that consensus for us. No, I'm just kidding. For real, do that. But no, I like that model because you're right. Like, let's be honest, if this is news to people listening, like 99% of your life is known by Google and whoever else. And that's why all your ads that you get are like the things you talked about. And you're like, oh, it's listening. No, they just know you that well. They've predicted what you're going to want because they've watched all your patterns. So to that point, that's already there. They already know that stuff. So for them to see then, oh, he liked it and she liked it, now that means, this may have more merit. I do think that's a great principle to follow. And certainly someone much smarter than me could make that kind of a good barometer for, okay, this is a good thing. And I think a little bit further beyond just the raw like button and stuff is, I think we saw for several years the danger of having all of that power to say whether something is true or not with a very small number of entities. Because then you can create whatever vision of the future you want, even if it's dead wrong, right? Just figuratively speaking. I don't want to completely say that I know everything or whatever, but if you have it a little bit more crowdsourced in that sense, and you apply that principle that you were just speaking of, then the average person kind of see, okay, a lot of people are kind of saying that it's more higher likelihood that this is actually what it says it is, right? So great points, really thoughtful. I think Brandon had a follow-up for you here about communication.
Yeah. So we're talking about free speech and communication. And I know that you have 3 daughters and you're a single dad. So what role does communication play in building a strong bond with all your daughters? And how are you teaching them to communicate?
Well, as I mentioned before, like I try to speak with each of them with a level of respect, not necessarily like I am your authority. I mean, there are times when I definitely flex that muscle, right? But generally speaking, what I would like them to do is come to a consensus with me that there's like, despite whether or not they like what I'm asking them to do, that they at least understand what my motivations are and that I have their best interests at heart. So I really try hard to focus on that. Like I said, speak like they're older, than they actually are. I think that goes back to the respect again. Communication plays a huge role because ultimately, like my job as a dad, is to teach them to be functional, good members of society. And I don't trust the school to teach them that any more than I trust anyone to be the arbiter of truth, right? Like the school is going to cover certain things for them, but I went through some of the best schools in the United States when I was a kid, and I left feeling like severely neglected. Like I had no preparation for the real world. I was taught to like memorize facts and pass tests, and that's just like not, at least in my industry, as a software engineer, like those skills were not often helpful for me, right? Like I needed to problem solve, and I was introduced with new problems all the time, and I needed to communicate well. And like shockingly, I got much better as a writer writing emails once I got into the work world than I ever did writing essays or anything else like that, because there was like a purpose behind that communication. There was a purpose behind that learning. So trying to help my kids to understand what the purpose is behind everything, I think is probably like the most important thing that I communicate to them, because it helps them understand why I make the decisions that I do and helps teach them how to make good decisions in the future, I think.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. So I think you're our first guest from California. I guess, well, Delian lived in California for a while, and then he moved to Miami after that whole viral moment where the mayor brought him over there.
He saw the light.
Yeah. Well, so tell me about the California school system. We hear all kinds of bugaboos about how crazy California is. I mean, especially you're in San Diego, right? So that would, to me, is like the hotbed of like every, woke ideology imaginable. So I'm sure some of that is overblown and it's not really as crazy as, some people say. Talk to me about what it's like, what you hear from your daughters when they come back from school, and what that system looks like to you.
So yeah, it's hard to like have your finger on the pulse of what education looks like if you don't have kids. It's been a long time since I went through school. And one of the most shocking things that I notice in my interactions for my kids is like the way that they sell it. There really aren't bullies at school anymore. And I was kind of like, well, that's cool, right? Like, you don't want kids to get picked on all of the time. And I think, that's where it starts as good. But if you push that way, way, way too far, then that's where you end up in the more woke ideologies that I think like anyone reasonable, given a long enough discussion on the topic, you start to realize that like these are ideologies that are based in feelings, not based in how a system actually works together to create results, right? And if we're constantly like dragging each other by our feelings and making decisions by our feelings, then the whole system is going to fall apart. I don't see a ton of that happening at their schools. I will say, like, when my girls watched the Barbie movie, I had some like pretty in-depth discussions with them about feminism and about like the differences between men and women. And it doesn't mean that men are better than women or women are better than men, but like it's okay if you don't want to be a construction worker. And also, you're probably never going to break the men's deadlifting record. Like, those are just facts, right? Like, we are built different. And that doesn't mean that you can't be a CEO if you want to, though, right? But so like, there was an element when we were discussing what happened in that movie where I sort of felt like they were like, whatever, dad, like, you don't know, like, women are oppressed or whatever. And like, that's not to say that there's no truth to that, but yeah, it does feel like that's maybe carryover from having the kids be like more sensitive and whatever. And I'm in like a more, I guess, conservative school district compared to other ones in California. So if it seeps into ours at all, then likely in like the LA school district or something like that, it's probably a lot more pervasive. I don't have a ton of information on that topic, but I do think it's important. Again, like, but I didn't think that the schools were doing a great job when I was a kid. So I have a lot to say about that in general. And like, the woke agenda is only some tiny part of it, right? Like, we need to set up our kids to succeed, and we need to set up our kids so that they actually learn. And the idea that we just cram them by age group in a room and like try to have them all learn at the same pace, that's my biggest problem with it. It's like, kids don't all learn at the same pace, and they're not all interested in the same things. They're not all good at the same things. And we just take this like very antiquated cookie cutter approach to education that I think is awful.
Yeah, I
we
think
kind
you're
of
exactly
did a whole
right.
episode on that exact topic. We can talk backstage more about that one.
Yeah.
We'll be here for the next 3 hours if we go down that
Yeah.
rabbit hole. So we're going to move on.
Mhm.
Justin, you got one, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, I've got a question. What lessons have you learned about yourself through the process of single fatherhood?
Probably learned lessons in the process of becoming a single father. A lot of those. Communication being one of them, right? Like, managing expectations. I think that like in relationships in general, putting a fake version of yourself as the way that you introduce yourself or whatever sets expectations that just lead to letdowns in the future. I learned that I am who I am, and I love who I am. So like, I need to be very open and honest about that from the get-go, and also just set expectations with whoever it is that I'm interacting with, whether it's a boss or a relationship partner or a friend, right? Like, these are maybe some things that you might not like about me, but it comes with all of these other good things. And like, I mean, well, so I guess I go into any type of relationship like with a very like honest approach now. I try not to like avoid any tough discussions. I think that that's something that I had to learn both like in relationships and as a father, that like, when you avoid things, the problem like doesn't go away, right? And it probably eventually leads to more problems. That's another lesson I learned. I learned that it's hard, right? And everyone has their own sort of set of problems. And a lot of times people would look at my life and they would think like, wow, like living the literal dream. And I look at my own life and I'm like living the literal dream, but I struggle on a day-to-day basis. Like, when I have 25 things that I need to do at once, and it's time to drive my daughters to dance at the same time that I have, like a interview planned, or like, someone important is trying to get in contact with me, or I'm just falling behind on the day-to-day, whether it's like vacuuming my house or doing the dishes or paying my bills or whatever it is. I learned a lot about balance, like being a father, being a single dad, trying to do everything from drive the kids to school, to take them to sports, to help them with their homework, to cook them meals. All of these things take an extraordinary amount of time. And I guess it should have been obvious that is all true, but I had no idea before I was a dad what any of that actually meant.
Well, so I guess I have a follow-up to that. Is there a piece of advice that anyone specifically gave you that really helped you with that? And is there anything that you could give to single fathers out there that could use the help?
one foot in front of the other is the best advice I could give to that, right? Like, realize that you're not the only one that has these problems. And like, realistically for me, my problems are tiny compared to like what so many other people are dealing with. I try to put things in perspective. Like, I don't want to live in the headspace always where I'm thinking about super negative things. But if I'm thinking about my own life as overly negative, it's sometimes helpful to think about like, well, my life's really not that bad because I'm not hungry, right? Like, I'm choosing between paying too much to get dinner delivered versus making something more healthy for my kids that I don't have time to do. But that is like a very small problem compared to like, can I feed my kids at all? So having that perspective, I think, is exceptionally helpful. I don't know that any one person taught me that, but I've just known enough people in my life. I love to have conversations with people, and I've encountered people from like all different places and backgrounds and whatever, and you learn about what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and I think that grounds me in, you know, just like how lucky I actually am, and that's super helpful.
Stacking gratitude
Every day.
Very
It's the only way to do
powerful.
it. Yeah. So speaking of perspective, you and I have had the pleasure of meeting a young content creator from Nigeria, and he has absolutely captivated and fascinated both of us with his positivity. He literally has to walk an hour every day just to charge his phone so that he can make videos and posts all over X. And I mean, when he told me that, I thought about how annoyed I was, you know, when my phone was dead one day and all I had to do was go in my car and charge it there, you know, instead. And that was this big hardship for me. So talk to me a little bit about what it is about his story that really captivated you and why you made it part of your mission to, we'll talk about the Starship launch a little bit as well, if you like, because that's fascinating that you got to go see that from like right there. You know, your videos and all that were amazing. But what was it about Saheed's story and him as a person that made you say, I really want to help him and you know, get him going on his direction?
As part of my mission to like make the dialogue better between everyone across all cultures, like, we need to understand each other better is one bit of it. And I think that Saheed comes from like a world that is just so completely different from mine that like I'm instantly intrigued and I want to know more about it. But then like what made it even better is that you always want to help people that help themselves, right? And it is so clear that Saheed is on his own mission, right? Like, he is willing to walk for an hour to go charge his phone every day, right? He's working and creating videos when like the only tool that he has is the default Android editor, right? And I mean, like, that sort of drive and motivation, and like, he's always so positive. It seems like he has nuanced opinions on like difficult topics. And he just seemed like the perfect guy to share with the world and also to reward, right? So when I saw him post a video that he was like so thrilled that he had the opportunity to view this Starship launch through his phone, and here I am like at the launch in person, I'm like, there has got to be a way that I can get this kid out to watch a launch. And there's no way that that's not net positive for everyone that's involved, right? Like, it's not that expensive to get him to Texas. There's like some logistical things that need to happen. We have to get his passport handled and visa and like whatever other stuff like that. There's difficulties of timing because we get like 10-day warnings before a launch is going to happen. But like, these are small problems relative to other problems. And how inspiring, what better way to spend my time and energy than to like, I mean, maybe I'll even go visit him in Nigeria, right? And if I get a chance to do that and like I can sort of show people where it is that this like beautiful young man is coming from and share, you know, some of the best parts of his world, also share some of the best parts of our world. Like, he didn't even know like rocket ships were real not that long ago, right? Like, and now he has a chance to go visit one. I think that there's like a lot of power in that. I hope that it's like a really compelling story. I hope that people are motivated to do cool things like that themselves when they watch what comes of this. So Yeah, Saheed is just like one of those guys that if you pay attention to him, you can't help but be attracted to his positivity and his work ethic and everything else. And yeah, I mean, his story is just, it's something else. There is no one in my neighborhood that walks an hour to go charge their phone so that they can get on the internet, right? It's something that I think people in the West should experience. They should understand that there is this other side of the world, that's the situation that they live in, and someone who's trying to make a better life for themselves, for the children that he has in the future. Saheed is 18 years old, by the way, so he's like very, very young man, but he's putting in the work, right? And I just know that this kid is going to be successful. I just know he's destined to do big things. And like, maybe I'm unlocking even bigger things for him by providing this opportunity. I can't think of much that would make me feel better than that. So definitely, like, it felt a lot like finding my lane when I had that idea, because as you know, like I am like, I'm all about mission. Like I want to do good, but I need to also like get views and clicks and interactions and whatever, or I don't grow and I don't get paid. So like what a perfect intersection of being able to do like what feels really good, just like from an emotional perspective, but also, aligns with what I'm trying to accomplish, professionally and everything else. Like, I want to do more things like that. And I'm going to have my radar on to identify opportunities like it. And hopefully, I can make a habit of trips like this, sort of like sharing people's worlds with each other.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to kind of recap two different points you raised there in that answer that I think are really, really valuable to kind of make sure we really hone in on. And the first is having awareness of like how good your life really is. A healthy dose of reality of how most people have to live on this earth is a very critical thing to appreciate, especially here in America. Like, if you're not doing too hot in America, that's still better than most people on the planet. Like, I don't think people understand that. And if you try to debate that, you're cherry picking facts at that point. Like, the level of comfort we have, even if you're not doing so hot in America, you have a lot of goodness here in your life. And I'm not trying to diminish anyone's experience, but like, I've seen some ugly places of the world. I've seen where evil really exists. And like, you just can't fathom how good we have it here in America unless you've seen that, And so back to stacking gratitude, like having that appreciation then opens your heart to like even be aware of other people's experiences. And then I think you raised a great point here too. We talk about fatherhood a lot, but I think a lot of men maybe aren't fathers themselves, but maybe they're an uncle, or maybe they can be a father figure to someone. And so this seems like a great time to kind of hone in on this point. And it's something that I've even been a little convicted of personally. Like, I haven't been the best uncle to my nephew, right? I should be more involved in his life. I should find more opportunities to like pay it forward, right? And so your example here with Saheed is a great instance of, you're clearly not related by blood. You clearly don't know each other that well, but you kind of saw a need and were able to, with abundance and generosity, start the ball rolling for him to have a new opportunity, right? And like, potentially it's an unforgettable experience for him and for you. And so I think it's a great example that we can all kind of think of as men, where we need to step into that role of the mentor, the father figure more often. Even if you aren't a dad, there's still probably skills or things you bring to the table that you could play that role for someone else if you allow yourself to kind of have that overflowing of the heart, right? And I think that's why maybe a lot of guys shy away from that, is it requires a little bit of those soft, touchy-feely types of things we don't like to lean into very often. But when you do that, just look at what you're creating right now with this specific example and how much goodness is rolling off of it. So just wanted to really like drive in on that. And if you have any follow-up, please interject, but just great examples.
I think that creating win-win situations is like one of the most masculine things you can do. And being afraid of like leaning into that softer side is not very masculine personally, right? Like, that's not to say that I'm going to be feminine all the time, but like, what kind of man are you if you can't seek out a win-win situation. And if we all did that all the time, if all great leaders, if all great men, if all powerful men were seeking out win-win situations as a default, right? Like, just imagine, like, there's a lot of opportunity. There is a lot of abundance. Like, we don't lack for resources on earth. We lack for good leadership. We lack cooperation. Like, we live on a very abundant planet. So we need to learn how to take advantage of it efficiently is sort of my take on that.
And the differentiator between a nice and a good man is that good men sometimes have the honor of opening a door for others instead of themselves, out of their abundance and their gratefulness.
Yeah. And nice isn't always so nice, right? Like, you can enable people by being nice. And that isn't nice at all. So I love creating a distinction between nice and good, because sometimes, like, good is tough love. Sometimes that is the best way to accomplish a goal, is you need to tell someone, like, you're doing something very wrong here. And that may not be a nice thing to do or perceived as nice by many people. In fact, I'm certain that I've ruined some relationships by having that tact. But the ones that survive are, like, at a respect level that are much higher than otherwise. Like, we have been through the trenches together, so to speak, right? Like, at a very, like, primitive level, I think it helps to go through difficult things together to create a bond, and, like, creating those moments. I just don't see how it's bad to try to help someone in that way, but it is perceived that way often. Yeah.
And it's because people, we were kind of talking backstage about it. They can't live in a reality where they may be the problem, right? It's such a damaging concept to their psyche that they would rather project and argue and whatever, right? But you raise a really good point there too. As men, like, that's another role we play, is not just the helper, the mentor type of role. Sometimes it's holding standards. Sometimes it's drawing some boundaries. And failing to do that is not love. It's not compassion. You're enabling, you're hurting other people down the line. Like, it's easier in the moment to be nice. And I'm not saying be a jerk or, like, call people out. That's not what we're speaking of. So don't twist my words, but especially in the context of, each other and there is already some mutual respect, like, saying the hard thing that they need to hear is leadership. That is love. And there's a right way to do it. It's not, hey, dummy, it's often, hey, look, if you're willing, I have something I'd like to share with you. You're not going to like it, and then kind of hit them with what they need to hear. And, if we don't surround ourselves with that, we're setting ourselves up for failure, right? Because we're going to tell ourselves our own stories, and it's all fake. And then life's going to hit you, and you're not going to have the people around you to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear,
Yeah.
So,
as men, we're not willing to hear that kind of tough love from many people. There's maybe 10 people in my life that if they have something really harsh but real to tell me, I'm going to be okay with it. Most of the people, I'm just going to tune that out, because I don't have time for that. So the fact that I have your respect and that I'm willing and able to listen to you guys when you told me in the past, hey, Dustin, you need to do this. I see exactly what's going on. Put the cookie down now. Yeah. That's right. Exactly. That's so welcome. Important to have that. So I'm glad I have you guys. There's a lot of changes I've been able to make in my life that without that trust, I would not be able to make. So you got to have that.
I think a quick way to think about it is like multi-step reasoning versus one. Being nice is like, in the moment, it feels good, but that is just one layer. And there's so many other layers to the onion, and you need to think about, like, the further reaching ramifications. So being a good person is someone who thinks, like, 5 steps out, like, what's going to happen in a month based on this decision that I'm doing right now, versus, like, how is this person going to feel, like, right now in the moment. I wish that people were better at extrapolating in that way and thinking of, like, how does this work 5 steps out? It seems like that's a problem in our government. It's a problem in our schools. It just seems to be a problem in our culture in general.
It's almost like being a good person is a bandwidth issue. Like, you have to play chess, right? So that's so interesting to think of it that way. If I'm too ADD and too stressed out and thinking about too many things, it's hard to be a good person because I can't problem solve on those levels.
We're the get it now generation, Mm-hmm. We were told that's good. Get everything when you want it, how you want it. Make your own rules, make your own morality, make your,
Yeah, have it your way.
Look at the world.
I like to make my own rules.
It's really that simple. We try and say these things are complex, but it's when you view everything as simply as, well, it's my way whenever I want it, creates a pretty crappy world pretty quickly.
I think that there's like greedy my ways and there's not following the leader my ways. And I think that there's like a distinction to be drawn there, because I never like being told what to do, but I also try like pretty hard not to be greedy. So like I may do things my way, but it's because I actually think that my way is better for everyone, not necessarily just better for myself. That's like the libertarian in me speaking.
I was kind of referencing the whole Burger King slogan there, and then like, anyway.
I get
you
the
click
point.
a button on your phone and you get food at your door, right? Like that inherently can breed bad expectations about the rest of life, if you solve everything that way. So
especially you compare it to people that have to walk an hour to charge their phone, right? Like he has no electricity or lights in his house, and we can push a button and have food delivered from like anywhere we want. That is, the world is not equal all across the globe. That is for sure.
Yeah, it's a great point. All right, Justin has a question for you.
So it's a question we ask every dad, and it's always such a unique answer. So I'm curious what yours is going to be. But what is one like core memory or something that just the second you think about this question, it pops into your head that you've experienced with your children?
I mean, so a good example actually was this week. We were talking about who to vote for in the upcoming election and like my own struggles with that, and hearing them give their take on the pros and cons of each presidential candidate. I mean, like it was so, I loved hearing that they understood nuance. I loved that they were able to like sort of rip on both sides and pick out a couple positive examples from both sides. That is like my spirit. That's what I want to pass down onto them, is to like critically think issue by issue. Every time that I have a new discussion with my kids that provides them the opportunity to prove to me that they are like operating at that level, and they do, that's like so super special. So whether it's a conversation with my 5-year-old where she brings up, like how she wants to come with me to the next rocket launch and fly on one of Elon's rockets, and it's just like, that's so cool that a 5-year-old is thinking about that, or my older 2 daughters talking about politics. And like for me, the best moments in my life are really good conversations that I have with people. Sometimes they're random encounters when I get a coffee. Sometimes it's when I'm traveling, and probably the ones that are the most dear to me are when they're with my kids. So those are the moments to me where I'm like, all right, I'm raising a good person. I'm raising someone who knows how to think for themselves. I have confidence that they're going to be successful in the future. That's what does it for me more than anything else.
I love that. So I'm gonna hit you with a hard one here. It's if you died today, what would you hope your daughters would say about you, and what do you think they'd actually say?
Oh man. I don't think often about myself dying. I have like so many things that I'd like to accomplish in my life before I do. I hope that they would say that I really cared, right? That like above all else, like I really wanted to be a good dad, and that I tried my hardest. I think that that's like the best lesson, because we all have different strengths and weaknesses. Something that I think is like one of the most important lessons in my life is that you don't have to start good at something. Like if you practice things, you can get better at them. So just the idea that like I follow through on what it is that I think is important to me, and I try to get better at it all the time. I would hope that they would say something about that. They would probably say that I'm like super strict or something, to be honest, is I think what they would say. My youngest says she loves me because I'm a silly dad. So I'm super happy with her saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's good. I like to ask that question because it is a tough one, and it's weird to have to kind of like play that out in your head, right? And it's actually, I think the first time we asked that was when we were doing our own episodes. I think Dustin hit me with that question, and I was like, dang, we need to use this more often. But yeah, I think, for me, as we think of like legacy and what we want for the future, you almost want those two to be aligned, right? What you hope they say and what they will say. And if there's a huge gap, like that's a good wake up call for people to realize, ooh, I need to make some changes, you know? So I appreciate your candor in your answers there. And you know, yeah, thanks for rolling with that tough one. I think we're kind of out of time. So Penny, what's the best place for people to follow you, support you? What can we do to help you out moving forward?
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I'm Penny2X, so I am Penny2X on X is the best place to find me. I spend all my time there. That's where I'm planning the trip for Saheed. That's where I'll do other cool things like that in the future. So yeah, please follow me on there. That'd be awesome.
All right. And any other things coming up outside of planning that big trip for Saheed?
Well, I told you I'm going to be headed to New York for an interview with Mark Benioff. I think it's like almost exactly a week from now. I'm super excited about that. I haven't done an in-person interview like that before. So like I'm trying to figure out what equipment I need to bring and making sure that I like don't lose out on this like great moment and opportunity. Really like focusing on preparing and making sure that I ask really great questions because he's such an incredible guest. So yeah, stay tuned on my X account for that as well. I should be dropping that in about a week and hope to bring, some really good discussion with like a brilliant and generous business leader.
Yeah, man, that's exciting. And congratulations on that. And, whatever we can do to help you and help, prepare you, just let us know. If you want to war game some questions, we'd be happy to help out. So do you have any closing thoughts for the audience?
No, I appreciate you guys getting on here and making a podcast about fatherhood. I think it's like such an important part of what we need to work on in our culture. I think that education is like outside of freedom, my number one issue. And a father's number one job is to educate his kids, right? So that is like the wisdom that I would hand on to any fathers. Like, don't necessarily try to be their friend, although that is like wonderful, right? But ultimately, you have to prepare them for the future. That's what I try really hard to do. I'm trying to prepare the future for them too, right? So yeah, that's my parting wisdom is let's create the best possible earth for our kids, and let's create our best possible kids for the earth. Yeah, that's it.
That's outstanding, man. Couldn't agree more. All right. Well, you heard the man. Enough talk. Let's go make a better world for our kids. Let's get climbing that mountain of fatherhood. We will see you in the next episode.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.